Today we are going to discuss the meaning of life. The question is whether we are going to talk in terms of attitude that brings us to realize the meaning of life, or whether we are talking in terms of state of being without attitude. We have kind of two choices there. And preferably, according to Buddhism, that one should look at the situation of being, the qualities of being, rather than trying to solve the problem or trying to improve the situation particularly, just relate to the state of being. And once there is understanding, transcending from attitudes or concepts, then you begin to find there's some process and some path, some journeys taking place. Otherwise, there's no journey, there's no process. If whole thing is highly influenced by concept and ideas, the attitude about life, which brings all kinds of dissatisfaction and also invites further confusion and deception and so forth. According to Buddhist tradition, that life, state of being as it is, has three types of characteristics, which is called three marks of existence, or three mudras. Mudra or mark is that the not only a symbol, not only adornment as such, but it is its own characteristic. We could say the mark of fire is burning, and the mark of white is its whiteness, mark of red is its redness. It's its own existence, rather than that adornment as such. So life happens to have three types of those, three types of qualities which are interdependent or intermingled with each other, its qualities. There is the mark of impermanence, mark of suffering, and a mark of non-substantiality or egoless. So, from the point of view of a mark of impermanence, that because life comes to being by all kinds of conditions, that basically life is evolved around a karmic cause and effect, result of a karmic cause and effect of all kinds. That we have parents, we have a body, we have mind, we have emotions, and we exist not independent of any of those, but we exist along with those conditions. Because we exist with those conditions, therefore we are not eternal entity. We can't have eternal entity, because eternity, if there is such thing at all, should become independent of any cause and effect. It should stand on its own without any reference point. But since our life is full of reference point and full of dichotomy, and therefore basically that we are not independent entity, and therefore we don't have everlasting quality, and therefore it is impermanent, is the nature of existence, and we exist, and constantly there is a birth and death takes place within our state of being, that every moment there is change. You might complain to your life, say that nothing's happening in my life. I'm bored stiff. Even the boredom itself is a process. It's happening. You are being bored, which is a journey that you are still taking place. The death and birth is still, your process of existence is still going through. It's like a flowing river that looks like still, and we give a name to certain rivers as if they exist eternally. But actually, if you examine it carefully, that the river flows constantly. And it changes its name and it changes its locations constantly. There is the fickleness of our mind and the fickleness of our body, which constitute our existence, our being. And nothing is permanent, nothing is really, you can grasp on anything at all. This is constantly changing, constantly happening all the time. Not alone that question of one day we're going to die, therefore things are impermanent. Not as crude as that even. Every moment is death, every moment is birth. And general birth and death is becoming is a very crude example of that. But on the other hand, there is some continuity, which is the discontinuity that pervades the whole thing. And therefore there is a working basis of some kind. Therefore there is a possibility of evolving spiritually, disciplining oneself, learning, liberating from bondage of samsara and so forth is possible because the continuity is discontinuity. Therefore things could be inserted through the flow of discontinuity. It's like somebody is inserting in a long line, a long queue of people waiting. If you suddenly got in the middle of the queue and try to join the queue, that there is a break, therefore you can join the queue. So the continuity consists of discontinuity, which makes things possible. But at the same time, we should understand quite clearly that we can't hang on to anything as permanent security. And this attitude is not a particularly disheartening attitude, as Buddha saw it. It's just a fact of life. And it is not particularly having a negative attitude to life, but it is things as they are. And then, second mark of existence is suffering. Sanskrit word for that is Dukkha, suffering. And the suffering in this case is more of dissatisfaction, unfulfilled, even in the midst of things are fulfilled completely, but still there is a gap somewhere. Things can never be ideal, and there is a constant pain, which include pleasure at the same time. It is a larger version of a pain than the smaller version of just a headache or knee ache or anything like that. It's nothing particularly physical alone. In fact, it's highly psychological. As long as we feel that we are handling ourselves in a certain way that we feel ourselves inadequate. Sometimes we feel that we have a gigantic head and a tiny body. Sometimes we feel we have a gigantic body and a tiny head. Things are very awkward sometimes, even most of the times. And we try to cover it up and straighten out and try to impress other people or ourselves. We do those things constantly. Those little games take place all the time. And the reason why we do that is we have something behind the whole thing which is not quite right. That's the dukkha, that's the pain. Things are not convenient and highly inconvenient. Never quite right, ideally. Even if we are ideally right, still we have to acknowledge it. And for the very reason when we begin to acknowledge our happiness and our rightness, that in itself a mark of pain, suffering. So this suffering is a larger notion of existence, a larger notion of pain. It's almost the shadow that we have. And suffering consists of, traditionally what's been said is the changiness of suffering from pleasure to pain. And then there is suffering of suffering, which is that there's one problem we are facing. On the top of that, another thing, something else comes up. That we catch flu. On the top of that, we have an accident. Or something happens, something is added. And then the third one is continual suffering, which we discussed already. That there is a long-lasting process of things are not quite right, not quite ideally happening. And the caution is that it is worthwhile to see them, acknowledge that. It is very important to do that. The problem that happens so far is we begin to say everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be taken care of, there's nothing to worry about it. And we've been saying that for a long time. And then we begin to realize in the corner of our eyes, there's something that's just about to catch us. And we try to ignore it until it becomes really gigantic and overpowering. And then we finally disheartened and we complain that God is not merciful and what have I done wrong with my life, and the situation is being upside down and it's not fair on me. I'm trying to be a good boy, a good girl. The rest of my life I would never hurt a flea. How come this has happened to me? So people often become disheartened to any tradition or any religion, any traditions which teaches the truth, are disheartened to them and become very violent because they feel they've been cheated. in some sense they'd be cheated if the doctrine said, one should not pay attention to what's going on, but just to suppress them, then you have been cheated. But at the same time, if the doctrine says that you should look at those situations twice, thrice, look at them, and let's face it, and then you have a constant understanding of things as they are, and you feel, in fact, you're being reassured rather than you be cheated. And particularly in time of trouble, if one has already prepared for that kind of trouble, dealing with that kind of trouble, then one feels that one is grateful to what you have learned. So it is very important, one of the foundations of spiritual discipline, to understand and realize the all-encompassing pain that we are consist of, our beings consist of all-encompassing pain. And then there is the third mark of existence, which is the anatta, or egolessness. Or non-substantiality. This is further confirmation from the impermanent level. We begin to see ourselves being not solid. Our state of being is made out of fragments of all kinds of things. We haven't been solid. We are not solid. And in the second stage, not only we begin to realize we are not only solid, but the flow of life also consists of dissatisfaction and overall pain, dukkha. And then in the third level, because of that, we begin to realize that there is no one to experience even pain, no one to experience the impermanence. There is a fundamental state of non-existence. You might find this is very terrifying or horrific, but this is the case. People are often afraid of a non-existence. For instance, for death, one thing. And also people are often afraid of they might develop their psychological state into unbalanced, psychotic level, and afraid of losing contact, losing hold on something. And those experiences are maybe a true experience of non-existence, non-substantiality. The idea of egolessness from Buddha's point of view is not so much of purely emptiness alone. When we talk about emptiness, we are still talking about the container is being emptied. We still have a container. But in this case, when we talk about emptiness or non-existence of ego, we are talking in terms of no ground to sit on. So a question of even emptiness, it doesn't imply groundlessness. But again, like the notion of impermanence, the groundlessness is also some kind of ground, surprisingly, which is a working base again. The experience of existence, experience of solidness, experience of form and emotions, everything are not totality, but they are particles of little things which made these. So in the final state, we don't exist. I think we should really get into this question very carefully, because this is one of the heart of a Buddhist doctrine, Buddhist teaching, is egolessness, is very important. And that's a very important subject for us to understand. And there's different levels of egolessness that we could talk about. And today what we're discussing is egoless from the point of view of Hinayana tradition. Direct egolessness, in terms of just viewing things as they are, and not philosophizing, not bringing in the meditative experience into it, but just simply looking at life. And in other words, what we're doing in the Hinayana level is learn how to feel, and not ignore how we feel, not regarding what we feel is bad or good, or discriminating anywhere at all, but just feel as we feel, fearlessly. If you feel that we don't have a substance, that's okay. If you feel that everything's suffering, that's okay. If you feel that everything's passing by constantly, we can't get a grasp on anything at all, that's okay. So there's something positive about the whole thing by using the negative analogies, negative looking at situation, brings a completely different sense of positiveness. It's fantastically positive, because there's nothing else than positive from their point of view, because we are actually looking at things as they are without trying to make it better or worse. It is very necessary to look that way, understand that way. That is the Hinayana approach of how to view life, how to look at, not to view in the sense of developing theory or concept ideas, but direct vision, things as they are. So perhaps I shouldn't say too much at this point, and maybe let you assimilate the ideas, and we should think quite hard, try to experience quite hard. You can work hard on that. It is possible. And just look at yourselves, how you feel, how you behave, in the very ordinary sense, nothing mystical, just simple person, simple state of situation, how we feel ourselves. Do we feel any one of those marks of existence? If we do, what's the relationship with the other marks of existence and things like that? We have to work in this point and we have to contemplate on that and try to feel ourselves. That's very important. So maybe we could have a discussion period.
You talked about impermanence, and like the river is always changing, but the river's still a river. So it's always changing. What is it in essence? It means us. While we're always changing,
well, you see, that's questionable. That river is still river because we think so. And to help that, we gave name. And that is precisely the whole point of like egolessness. Is in Buddhist tradition you say there's no self, no ego. Self is just a name, word, which we shouldn't use. Like when we don't have any clear idea, we call something. We try to call it, try to give a name to it. Like nobody will leave their children without named. Immediately it's born, we give a name, and we don't want to call it it. And it irritates parents, naturally. So, it's the same way that we think we have managed to capture the passing impermanence by holding on to it, giving a name. But in fact, if you look at it very closely, the river you saw yesterday is not the same river you saw today. You're seeing today. It's been constantly changing. And you here and I'm here are not the same thing as yesterday's you and me and today's you and me. It's entirely different. Otherwise, we can't even talk and communicate.
It seems that I have a sense of a contradiction in two ideas that I have. One being the sense of one of the meanings of life would be to strive for perfection, and the other being a need to not judge my actions. And these two seem to be in conflict, because the not judging is the one that's open. But the other one means I'm working towards something. I'm trying to improve.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And it is possible that you can do both at the same time. You can strive for something by not judging. It is possible, but that doesn't mean to say one had to just be aimless and repetitious and just sort of like idle passenger who doesn't pay attention to road. But there is possibility of not judging and still striving and still putting a lot of energy and exertion to practice and discipline. It is possible, because judgment is, as you see, when we talk about a judgment, we are talking about, usually when we talk about judgment, we are talking about reshaping, possibilities of reshaping the situation. Then you judge and you would like to change the situation into something else, or else you could reject or you could accept. But you can judge in another way, which is just acknowledging what's going on, what's the appropriate situation. So judgment from that point of view could be just awareness of what's going on in the present moment, which has nothing to do with the judgment we are used to use of this particular word, term. So if you could be a nowness in your judgment, you're accurate, and you have your ground to walk on, you have your process to strive, trot on the path, it's possible. So the caution is awareness of some kind that is not conditioned by the expectations of the future, and not derived from the experience of the past, but just present situation of things as they are directly. And you can plan futures for that as well from that point of view. The future is associated with the present situation, rather than the future is as future as such. There's no such thing as a future, really. But the future can be only worked on by present situations. Okay.
You said on the last thing that we should just feel, as there's the Hinayana method, but it seems in the Hinayana teachings, the Arhat is the who's gone beyond emotion, gone beyond feelings, is sort of the hero or the person that they're striving to. And does that mean that through feeling that we go beyond feelings?
Well, feeling in this case is slightly different. Again, there's a linguistic problem we have here. Feeling is just, experiencing through a perception, this case, rather than feeling from a sense of feeling good or bad as such. There's different types of feeling we are talking about. We are not talking about, feel great or feel terrible from that sense of feeling, but just experiencing, the picking up the message through your antenna, just very simply. And the Arahats are supposed to also have that kind of insight. Otherwise, they couldn't maintain their journey or their existence if they don't have that kind of sharpness.
Rinpoche, isn't feeling great or terrible part of the feeling process? There's no way that if you're, going through life and things feel good to you or feel bad, that's all part of feeling. And if you're experiencing something and you're saying, "Oh, I'm feeling great," you can't deny that feeling. Isn't it just part of the whole idea of seeing what it is?
Yeah, in some sense it is part of the whole thing, yes. But at the same time, you see, such experience of intense feeling in the sense of that whether this is going to help my ego or going to be threatening to my ego, my existence, could be very blinding because you don't see the truth directly because you are constantly trying to secure yourself. So consequently you are bewildered. So you don't have clarity. That's a possibility. But in any case, there's a difference between just feeling as feeling directly, picking up by your radar system, and conditional feeling, which is connected with for or against.
Feeling like a river flowing will come naturally, as long as you don't become too involved with.
Yes, well, the feeling is actually the seed of, prajna and compassion. In fact, without some kind of reaction, rapport, that you become zombie.
I'm having a problem with the spirituality, both yesterday and today in your discussion. Today, for instance, things that you say about impermanence and non-substantiality seem to me to come quite naturally out of the science that I learned in high school, for instance, to be nothing particularly special. And yesterday, too, when you were speaking about the essence of Buddhism that was first introduced into Tibet being a non-aggressiveness, non-aggression, I was immediately reminded of my and other people's participation in non-aggressiveness in the early 60s here. And I wonder why this is what we are being here is somehow labeled spiritual. Whether this is in any way separate from those same impulses, from my understanding of that, yes, everything is nothing, or that the impulse of the movement in the early 60s towards that, what seems to me a very similar feeling, and the idea of making it somehow spiritual makes it separate from that for me, and I wonder whether it is separate.
Well, you see, the question there is maybe from the theistic tradition, the spirituality probably means slightly different. Some kind of holiness, a greater sacredness of some kind, which has nothing to do with your kitchen sink, particularly, unless your kitchen sink has been blessed. And in this case, what we are talking about is different kind of holiness or sacredness. And the very ordinariness, as you said, that such things we discussed yesterday today are not particularly special. They seem to come naturally. That is true. I mean, that's why it is called the truth. It should be, if it's really true, it should be natural. If it's false, then you have to twist your mind around and think twice. So I think, that is the sacredness, that is the holiness, and that is the spirituality. But the interesting point is when somebody put it in language and word and make it into a path, part of the path, that makes the differences. You have experienced those in the past, but just you have experienced them, and nothing's been done about it. So now what we're doing is you have experienced them already and you are still experiencing them, but we're doing something with it. We are using that as a part of the journey, part of the experience, which you call what's called the Dharma, is the, following the Dharma as it's called, is the work with those situations. So the ordinariness is the sacredness from that point of view. And I think it is very good that, in fact, you didn't feel you're being startled or you had uplifting feelings about the whole thing, which makes more sense, which means that seemingly that you are taking very exactly as it should be taken. Somebody's there. Okay, you have your outfit.
Rinpoche, when you read Milarepa's biography, it seems like he's a very extreme, kind of extremely spiritual, materialistic, and that sort of thing. How do you explain that?
I think it doesn't need a particular explanation, or we don't have to defend Milarepa particularly. I think the question there is just there's a sense of fearlessness and a sense of integrity, and also a sense of working hard with what he's doing brings closer. And more than that, that he was not concerned with propagating the truth at the early stage of his life, when he feels still weak and he feels still he needs more practice. He was not interested in propagating the truth. And if he did so, then he becomes spiritual materialistic. But what usually happens with the people is when they're early stage of spiritual development, when they feel they need some feedbacks that you are doing right, so immediately what usually one does is you go out and preach so that you get some feedback and what you said is right, everybody agrees with you, cheers you, and feels good about it. And then hopefully that will uplift your practice at the same time, which is the spiritual materialism. The beginning or the origin of spiritual materialism started that way. In the case of Milarepa, that he was so brave and so direct that he didn't look for such thing like that at all, and he just worked on himself. And particularly the dedication is immense. But in the case of spiritual materialistic psychological approach, that usually people don't have that much dedication. Their dedication becomes encouragement rather than a direct dedication and direct involvement that you are doing what you think you are doing is right. And whether somebody likes it or not, it doesn't matter. In the case of spiritual materialistic approach, that everything should be proved publicly, there should be popular vote. And then you are doing right. And that is the problem. In the spiritual materialistic approach is you need help from the public, so to speak. In the Milarepa's case, it is completely the opposite. So I think he's okay. Okay, let me see. Which one? Yeah. Can you repeat that question?
You spoke last time about being a nuisance, and I just would like you to clarify more what you meant by that.
Do you have any ideas?
The one thing that came to my mind was wanting. That when I want things, that becomes a nuisance.
Yeah, Well, that's exactly the same as what we've been talking just now, a few seconds ago. It's the same thing, that if you need further reassurance from the world outside and to show off or to use the energy of other people to entertain yourself, to prove you and support you, and then you are asking for tips and possibilities of becoming a nuisance. Because some people probably doesn't want to give you tips, and some people probably would like to give you a lot, but then there is a problem.
You talked about non-existence as the true state. How did we come to be in this dilemma? Was there a fall from non-existence, for instance?
How what?
How did we come to be in the present dilemma of not being at a state of non-existence?
How we became?
In a state of non-existence. If non-existence is the reality or the true state, how did we come to be away from that?
How we become aware of that?
Away from it, not in
Away
it.
from, I see. Well, you see, that's the one of the question of, that's why it's called mark of existence. It's called the mark, the quality in my life is whether there is non-existence. Because we never been away from it. It's just to acknowledge that. And we are not purely talking about something that we misunderstood or we are sort of fall of man approach. We are not talking about that at all. We are just talking about we still are in that condition. We still don't exist. We might think we do, but still that is the case. So we are never been away from it. We still are. So that's one of the horrific part of it, that we begin to realize that we can't even say that was a rehearsal. And we are still here in that state, whether you like it or not. That's why I call it 3 marks of existence, meaning of life.
I once heard Vajra defined as the one thing in everything which is not impermanent. Is there such a thing?
Is there such a thing as
Vajra, as the one thing which is not impermanent?
Vajra means indestructible, you know. Well, we are changing into another subject, and maybe we should discuss that later on when we discuss Vajrayana doctrine. But I think at this point we shouldn't have any hope. We just better stick to the Hinayana doctrine, and which will provide a lot of ground, if you like to put it that way. There's one behind.
You described the second mark as suffering, or dukkha, but you also described it as a gap, an unfulfilled gap, and also as pleasure. Could you explain that part, the pleasure part?
Well, the pleasure is also a part of the pain. Or pleasure is the pain from that point of view. We are not talking about polarity in the sense of dukkha opposed to sukha, or happiness. We are talking about a greater dukkha, or pervasive dukkha, or pervasive pain, which acts as a basic ground in which the little freckles of pleasure, little freckles of pain bounces around. So we are talking about a general area of psychological state of separateness, gap, dualistic misunderstanding, that we think we exist because of something exists, therefore we don't. And that really bothers us constantly. that experience is a very subconscious experience. And nobody has looked at very consciously, and so far we know, that nobody had actually come to grips with that particularly, but with everybody who are intelligent or not intelligent, everybody had the sense of separateness, sense of that you don't really belong anywhere, particularly that you are what you are. And even the reference point, it doesn't particularly help you. That kind of a basic sense of aloneness and loneliness, whether you have lots of company or help, but still you feel something's not quite right. We are talking about a general sense rather than, dichotomy from pleasure to pain. There's one here.
Since there's no ego, then when experiencing the now, which is a constantly changing thing, and when realizing that we're even experiencing that even alters the experience, what is the experience and who's experiencing it?
Nobody's experiencing. The experience is just itself. That is possible. The experience is just itself. It does not have any belongings. The experience doesn't belong to you or somebody else. It is just experience. And you decide to choose it as yours, and you labeled it. But since there's no such thing as you don't experience anything. So this is the whole point. In fact, you don't attain enlightenment. You don't attain enlightenment. When you attain enlightenment, there's no you left. So you as such, can't attain enlightenment. You have to disillusioned, and you dissolves. Then attainment of enlightenment is there. So I'm afraid it's rather hopeless. That you can't witness your death of your own ego, that I have been using the analogy of you can't watch your own funeral.
The yogis speak of Atma as Satchidananda, as existence, conscious existence. And Ramana Maharshi speaks of truth as the self. And in Hinayana Buddhism, the truth is the truth of non-existence. How? Please put it together.
Well, I think there's no fundamental contradiction that when we talk about the continuity doesn't exist because of discontinuity. The only thing that exists is discontinuity. And experience doesn't exist because there's no experiencer, but still there is a state of experience. I think that the Hinayana Buddhist approach to presenting the whole case is geared to kindergarten level. So, in other words, make sure that you understand right at the beginning. But maybe the Hindu tradition that the situations were presented were maybe to adults who already have some glimpse of those already. And the same thing happens in the Buddhist Mahayana part, that the Mahayana tradition is geared to adults, and Hinayana is presented to a child. So I think it's you need another more advanced level of thinking. So that's the only case. And actually, therefore, it is advisable to go back, take a step back to Hinayana's way of looking at things as they are. And then beyond that, you can accommodate the Hindu philosophy or the Mahayanist philosophy. You can accommodate that. It is possible, but I don't think there is any contradiction as such. That when Ramana Maharshi talks about a self, Atma, that was often always qualified by saying higher self, rather than just the funky self. So when we talk about a higher, instead of saying higher in Buddhism, we talk about no self, which is the same thing. If there has to be higher, then there has to be nothingness. Otherwise, you can't be higher and lower. You're still not fighting with the big and small, the ape instinct level, which is quite different. So I think it is possible to experience and possible to also reconcile those teachings. But as Buddhist ways presented, that you are advised to go step back to kindergarten level first to make sure that you understand how to read and write before you have any ideas of philosophy. That's the basic point. There's a lady over there.
Does egolessness come and go? And if it goes, does that mean that it really came? Or is it a level, only a level of egolessness, and when it really comes, it doesn't go?
Well, you see, egolessness is like it's different from being penniless, where you had money and now you don't have money. You become penniless. You become bankrupt. It's quite different from that. That ego doesn't exist, so egolessness is somehow is just a term for that. So egolessness is there always. It is the experience of that, egolessness. So that experience is also continual experience. But we usually try to suppress it. We try to make sure that we don't actually experience it, because it feels somewhat irritating and not quite pleasant.
This work? I was wondering about, you were speaking of feedback and the sensation that you have a certain journey on the path of brothers and sisters, and where does that become a spiritual materialism? When you're, like you say, you become entertained by the energy of other people. Is there a possibility of sharing together and not falling in that trap?
Sharing together with?
Sharing together your awareness of your changes without being entertained by it.
That's the notion of Sangha, actually, is that everybody stand on their own. When your next door neighbor fell down, you are strong enough to pick him up and help him. That's possible, but at the same time you have to be strong to do that. Otherwise, you set reactions to all throughout your Sangha. Your whole Sangha begin to collapse if you're leaning on each other.
What is the meaning of compassion, and what value does it have in the cynical view of life?
In what view?
With the cynical view of life?
Yeah. Well, we're going to discuss compassion as we discuss about Mahayana Buddhism, and I think probably it needs just more than answering question, needs a whole talk. And we're going to look into that. And in connection with what we discussed today in the relationship with the compassion is that sense of openness is compassion. This is the seed of compassion here. Hinayanists don't talk about compassion as being part of the practice, but they have a hint of that. Is that to be open to life, to be open to the actual effect of the impermanence, to be open to the the experience of egolessness, to be open to the suffering. And once you're ready to learn, you're ready to open, you have already opened, then something takes place, which is the compassion and wisdom comes together. But that's just the beginner's level at this point. And we have to discuss the details about compassion when we talk about Mahayana Buddhism, which will be later in the course, I suppose. Friends, probably we have to finish, end at this point. And another thing I would like to suggest everybody is when we have a discussion period, and if you could possibly stick to the subject that we discussed, already we are discussing, so that we don't have to duplicate anything and waste any further times, so that the question, asking question is very important. Not only that you have to know something about it, but you are sharing with the rest of the community here at the same time. So trying to make it a very concentrated one, and if you can devote your curiosity to just the level of things what we discussed. Thank you.